Parties are so boring without drugs. Right now, all I see is this multicolored dance floor, some huge bellowing speakers, and some people dancing or stumbling about, depending on how you look at it. All I hear is some blaring house music, pretty standard for a nightclub, nothing exciting in particular. So I drag myself to the bar and perch on a stool. I wait for a while for the bartender to acknowledge me. The bar is showered in a pink light from the roof. It feels like some sort of rave purgatory in which I wait for my escape, or in this case, the bartender. Finally, the pale, slender man appeared before me, staring into my soul before asking me what I wanted to drink. "I'll have a gin and tonic," I uttered to him. My focus was more on a bag that sat in front of me on the bar. It was a small packet that had a few pills in it. Like the druggie I am, I hastily snatched up the bag. "Hell yeah!" I cut myself off, realizing that they could be someone else's. I couldn't yell about it like that. I'll just have to grab my drink and leave for the corner of the club, so that's what I did. I pulled open the packet. With a satisfying wheeze, the packet let out a sigh of fermented air which found itself beneath my nose. The scent was fruity. It was like strawberry and freshly cut grass. I pulled out one of the pills. It was torpedo-shaped. Half of it was deep purple and the other half was light pink. I rolled it around in my hand to make sure there was nothing obviously wrong with it. If not, then it should be fine. Pills are pills, no matter where you find them. As I was rolling it, I found a small logo carved on the side that read Wolfbane. I chuckled to myself and thought of that old rhyme. Even a man who is pure of heart and says his prayers by night may become a wolf when the wolfbane blooms and the autumn's moon is bright. I chanted it quietly to myself. At this point, I was only trying to scare myself a bit. It didn't work. I popped the pill onto my tongue and took a sip of my drink to help get it down. Even though I tried to wash it down, it was still hard to get down. It nearly made me vomit at one point. Once I had gotten the first one down, I took a couple more and leaned back on the wall and waited for the fun to begin. The first hallucinations were pretty normal. Everything got more colorful and the music slowed slightly with the bass boosted. I started to relax a bit and decided to make my way over to the bar again. I sat on a stool with my back to the bar and watched the dance floor get confusing. A few seconds later, as I was starting to get into my experience, I glanced at the floor and all I saw was grass. The floor had turned to grass. "I'm really off my head," I shouted. Then I heard a rumbling, a low, deep growl from the earth. Then I heard the sound of soil hitting the ground. Trees had sprouted from the floor. Everything was happening so fast. The trees had become towering monstrosities. I jolted out of my seat. The music had completely stopped. All I could hear was the wind through the trees, even though there was no wind, or was there? The walls of the room had gone. The only boundaries that existed now was a thick black mist that acted as a veil for some of the further away trees. I couldn't see anybody for miles around. There were a few owls that I could see. They were all dark brown. They would have blended in with the trees if it wasn't for their glowing pink eyes. As I watched in fascinating birds as they swooped around and perched on small branches, I saw that the trees had small marks on them and that was oozing a glowing fluorescent liquid. By this point, none of this was surprising to me. There were flecks of glowing liquids everywhere, almost as if someone had flicked their paintbrush onto my little land. The next thing I noticed was how my body temperature had increased quite a lot. I looked down at my hands and stared in horror. My hands, they had turquoise thick fur on them and were much larger than usual. As I tensed up, something sharp pierced through my fingers, something glowing purple and sharp. "Oh, fuck!" I screamed in pain. It took a few moments to stop reeling from the pain. Once I had taken a good look at what had been torturing me, it was something like big claws, fluorescent claws. I was bleeding from where the claws had grown from, and even my blood looked like a supernova, if you can imagine that without being as high as I am right now. I heard a sort of zapping sound from next to me, sort of a phaser noise. I was pretty busy with my hands, but I turned to look anyway, and what I saw was a mirror that had materialized, but what was more worrying was what I think is me, but I'm not so sure. What I saw looked like a serial killer's persona. Although, I'm not sure that I'm a werewolf, but some sort of werewolf rave demon. My eyes were bright green, my teeth were pure white, my saliva is black, but somehow it's glowing. To say the least, I'm beautiful. Hell, these drugs are so much fun. Well, whilst the night is young, I might as well start messing about as a werewolf. Just as I thought this, the club's dance floor appeared right in the middle of the forest, with all the dancers on it. Behind me, the bar had appeared also, with people. I guess I'm going to be a true werewolf tonight for a while after all. So, without further ado, I turned and sank my teeth into an unsuspecting alcoholic. He tasted like watermelon. I watched beads of starry blood fly and thought to myself, this is going to be the best night of my life. Once I was done ripping all the drunkards to shreds, I turned to the bartender and gently grasped his head between my jaws. And with one sleek movement, I heard a crack, and his body went completely limp. By this point, the others in the club had noticed and were screaming and clawing at the trees, trying to escape somehow. But there's no escape in this world of mine. I pounced towards the nearest victim and tensed my hand to reveal the claws. A few moments after her throat had been slit with a precision, a trickle of rainbow blood formed at the wound. It was no time at all before a man that had been clawing at a tree had his face ripped open. That sounds great, but the best part was that he was still alive, but not for much longer. So I clawed at his stomach and savored my satisfaction by watching his utterly white innards crawl out. I clawed my way through countless more cattle before I came to one woman that I particularly thought was pretty. I pinned her against a tree and drew my claw and started putting marks on her face. I felt highly artistic after that, but I wasn't quite finished, so I slammed my jaws shut on her mandibles and rubbed my big animalistic tongue around her mouth before forcefully ripping off her lower jaw. About a half hour later, I had finished my little play, and so I decided I'd give cannibalism a go. In this little dream world of mine, it was like an all-you-can-eat buffet, and they were all different, delicious flavors. I really didn't want to leave this world, but an hour later, I felt tiredness finally grasp me, and I fell into a deep slumber among the bodies. A few hours later, I imagine, I woke up, but sadly, not in my dream world, in the club. I rubbed my eyes and stood up, getting ready to be pushed out by the cleaner, but no, there was no cleaner, there was only carnage. There was so much blood everywhere, and innards strung from the lights, and limbs that had been left so unrecognizable as arms or legs, and or whatnot. I guess my dream world wasn't much of a dream world after all.